Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for making it on this week's webinar hosted here by Coeus Consulting. My name is John Gromley. I'm the events coordinator. We'll go ahead and get started in just a few minutes as everyone gets settled in. But thank you for making time today. We'll be talking about business continuity, disaster recovery, and backup, ransomware. And of course, I hope all of you enjoy your free pizza today from Domino's and enjoy the nice $50 gift card as well. So thank you for taking a few minutes, and we'll be getting started very, very shortly. A couple of housekeeping items. There'll be a survey at the end of today's event. If you have a chance, please fill out the survey. We'd love to get your feedback on how you appreciate it or ways of improving this event that we've done today as well. And also, more importantly, we will have Q&A throughout the event as well. A couple of highlight things today that we'll be covering. Obviously, a lot of people bring up business continuity, disaster recovery. They bring up backup. Small to medium businesses are constantly battling with the cost of doing that. But we've got some tidbits today to cover. A lot of it is going to be about really understanding downtime, understanding the implications of cybersecurity insurance on whether or not you can or cannot restore your information as well. So we will definitely be covering some of that today as we get started on our event as well. But thank you again for making the time, and we'll be doing a couple setups real quick, and then we'll get started. So definitely thank you again for joining out today. Thank you. And I see we have about 5, 6 people joining. That's wonderful. Thank you all for joining this morning. We'll be getting started in just a few minutes as well. Again, my name is John Gormley. I'm an events coordinator here at Coeus Consulting, here based in Phoenix, Arizona. But I live in Oro Valley, Arizona, near Tucson. So just a little food for thought there. But do appreciate you all making the time today. This is actually one of our very first webinars that we've done as a company. This is a great venue to help not only communicate directly with our prospects and clients, but it's also a great way of sharing kind of what we're doing. The managed security service space, obviously, is very, very, very crowded space. But what really differentiates, consultants and firms like us is really how we really tailor what we do specifically around the small to medium business marketplace. And we'll be covering that today during our session as well. As I mentioned earlier, for those that were just joined on, we'll be doing a survey at the end of this event. Please take a moment and fill out the survey. It's just a very couple of questions we'd love to get your feedback on. And if you have any Q&A during the event, please use the Q&A button on your display, and I'll definitely get a point of answering the questions at the end as well. If you haven't had a chance yet and you've checked your email, you obviously have seen that you received a Domino's card from me today. Enjoy your $50 Domino's card. Please take a moment if you'd like to order your pizza now. We do have a few minutes before we get started. And one of the earlier messages I got this morning from a dear friend of mine asked why $50? It says, well, come on. I mean, who orders just pizza, right? You got pizza, you got hot wings, you got cookies, you got all the other cool stuff, sodas, diet, whatever. So take the time. And enjoy. And again, it's compliments on the Coeus Consulting, but thank you again to our dear partner and sponsor today, Kaseya Datto. They were the ones that helped provide the funding for today's events. We definitely want to give them a shout out as well. And not only are they an excellent partner and produce some really great solutions, but they're a tremendous supporter of Coeus Consulting and our ventures as well. So thank you to them again for Kaseya Datto for their sponsorship today for today's event. And we'll be getting started here in just a few minutes as well. But again, if you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, check your emails. Go and order up your pizzas if you like. If you want to do it now, great. If you do it later after dinner, please do. But please enjoy. Personally, for me, I like the meat lovers pizza. I like the thin crust, a little East Coast. I do put garlic. I do put red peppers. I've been known to put jalapenos on peppers and other things on the pizzas. So please take your time and enjoy that as well. And if you order cookies, enjoy the cookies, but definitely don't skip the hot wings. Personally, I'm a kind of a buffalo hot wing kind of person. So definitely take a moment and enjoy that as well. So thank you for that. And a couple of things I mentioned for people that were on earlier. We will be doing a survey at the end. Please take a moment to fill out the survey when you do receive it. We definitely would love your feedback on this event today. We'll be hosting several webinar events, one every month for this year and the remainder into next year as well. We think this is a great venue to help communicate with our customers, and we'll be having various different topics. I think next month we'll be diving a lot more into cybersecurity insurance. We'll be touching on that today as well. And we'll be getting into, obviously, a lot of discussions about where cybersecurity is going. We have some events coming up that will be talking about artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. which again is everywhere and everywhere. And the other thing also we get a lot of requests on from our customers, particularly our managed services customers, are asking us, well, what's the threat vector looking like? And that's going to be another webinar we're going to be talking about as well. Is not only is it the adversarial AI threat vector a grave concern, but obviously with layoffs, turnovers, acquisitions, the rise of insider threat continues to be a challenge for regardless of the size of your organization or what vertical market you function as well. So definitely going to dive into that now. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to go ahead and dive in. Again, if you have any questions, please use your Q&A button. And then at the end, I'll also be any pausing for any additional possible questions you have. And also, as I asked, please take a moment and fill out the survey. But for those of you that have a chance, please go ahead and order your Domino's pizza. I hope you guys enjoy, and thank you again for making time today for our presentation, our demonstration today as well. So thank you. We'll go ahead and dive in and get the presentation up and running, and we will get into it. So a couple things, as we get started on the event today. Let's really talk about what the title really means, right? Don't let a ransomware crisis become a catastrophe. To be honest, every single ransomware event is a catastrophe. There's no such thing as a gentle ransomware attack, right? You get one host that gets affected, it moves laterally through your network, it affects other hosts. Hackers obviously doing great things by encrypting your data and then extorting money from you and Bitcoin and so on. But it comes back to how do you recover from that? And that's kind of the genesis of what we're going to be covering today. So again, business continuity disaster recovery for SMBs, presented by Coeus Consulting in partnership with Kaseya Datto. And again, we want to thank them very much for their sponsorship today. For those of you that got the cards, you got your email. I hope you enjoy it. Take a moment, order your pizza. Definitely take it. Hope you guys enjoy. Please, again, put that in the survey that you actually prefer Domino's or maybe some of the pizza. Definitely. But thank you again for joining. Let's really dive into agenda perspective for a moment. So number one, starting point we're going to talk about is decoding ransomware. Right? Ransomware itself continues to harbor organizations operationally, financially. It takes your data, holds your data, ransomwares your data, extorts data, extorts money. But people in the manufacturing space will tell you it also shuts down their production lines. People are in the supply chain, global supply chains. It talks about how did they get infected? They got affected from somebody within the supply chain. It wasn't them. It was somebody within their chain that became attacked by ransomware, and it spread across, the channels. What is the downtime in the cybersecurity? And this is, again, something that we're going to provide some really good detail on in today's presentation. Defining a business continuity disaster recovery plan, defining it comes back to what is your expectation of recovery? Do you hope to be up in an hour? Do you hope to be up at all? Do you hope to get your data back? Who's got your data? Have you backed up your data? We'll get into that. Backup, backbone is the restoration journey. What does backup really mean? And that's why I really want to make sure, that people understand what that's about. On-premises cloud strategy, backup support, we'll get into that because, again, there's so many different ways of doing it. Compliance requirements, your recommendations for optimizing backup environments, understanding the overall benefits of the plan. This kind of where we get into kind of what our service delivery model is to helping our clients kind of solve this business challenge. Speakers today, myself, John Gormley, will be obviously on the events coordinator for Coeus Consulting. Najraj, who is the general manager of Datto, Kaseya, BCP. He actually was going to be joined today, but we understand there's some things going on, so we send our blessings to him as well. But he has definitely been a great resource. I just wanted to know that a good portion of the slide deck we're covering today did come from Naj. And not only do I really appreciate his partnership, but again, as I mentioned, thanks to Kaseya Datto for their sponsorship for today's event as well. So let's talk really about the two players real quick, which is Kaseya Datto. Again, Kaseya offers robust capabilities of backup DR BCP solutions, but they really, again, they tailor to the MSP market, which is what we are. Kaseya acquired Datto in 2022, which gave them a lot of technology capabilities for their portfolio. We're huge fans of them, especially, obviously, the topic that we're covering today as well. We are a firm based out of Phoenix, Arizona. Most of you know who we are. We provide IT managed services, compliance as a service, cybersecurity as assurance, infrastructure capabilities as well. But our real DNA is what we're talking about today, which is really about providing the ability for people to recover from cybersecurity attacks as well. So in the beginning, let's start really what really kicked this whole event off. Number one is I'm old enough to remember, been in the industry 31 years. that back in the day, it was I had my laptop, we had a server in a raised floor room with an air conditioning running very, very loud. And that was the resemblance of where our data for the organization was located. It was in a physical server. And we used to put these little cassette tapes in the server and it would back it up. And then we'd show these things in a red box and we would drop it off at the front desk. And somebody from Iron Mountain back in the day, I know they still exist, but Iron Mountain would show up every Friday to pick up the case and take our cassettes away. And that pretty much was our backup strategy. But then again, remember, this was everything that was physically sitting in our data centers, right? Now, obviously, since then, data's on the move. Data's moving everywhere. Then the introductions of SharePoint and OneDrive. Now the idea that we don't want our users to store their data anymore on their machines. We want them to store it in the depository of SharePoint and of course in OneDrive or the company OneDrive as well to get it out of the endpoint. Why? Because if laptops back in the day were getting stolen and hackers can get into a laptop, they can have access to all the data you had locally, right? So the idea of trying to get around that was move everything to the cloud, move everything to some form of a platform, and then that way we know that organizationally we have an idea of our governance of our data. So if an endpoint device ever got jacked, at least we have the ability to kind of know where the data is. And more importantly, it helps us understand what we need to back up. Then obviously Office 365 and Google Workspaces. So now everyone went email online. No longer are people doing Exchange on-prem anymore, or they have CC mail. Don't laugh. That did exist once. But the idea now that we now went to the cloud and said we're going to use hosted email services, which means our email data is now going to be hosted by somebody else, right? So this becomes another place where our data has now moved to. Then we get into Microsoft Azure, where we now get into the cloud itself, where we now have cloud depositories and storage in the cloud. And now we have our data in now a third location. So now we have on-premises data in our devices. We have our SharePoint and our OneDrive. We have hosted email. Now we have hosted cloud. And then we have the inception of SaaS applications, things like Salesforce.com, QuickBooks, all these are SaaS applications. Now, if you're in the medical space, you're in the healthcare space, obviously, you're working with things like Cerner, McKesson, Allscripts, electronic medical records. If you're in obviously legal, there's how many legal portals out there with legal applications. Then again, this is another place that your data now resides, right? So now thinking about, you went from back in the day where it was like a server in a room with a bunch of air conditioning blowing everywhere. Now you're in 4 different locations, right? By the way, you still have data sitting on your laptops. And so understandably, when you're talking about trying to grasp where all your data is and trying to talk about a backup strategy or talking about a recovery strategy, you now have to multiply it by 5x because now you have to think about, well, how am I going to get access to all my data, right? Now, here's the golden problem with ransomware. Ransomware is everywhere there's data. When people think about ransomware only affects servers, right? It only affects laptops. It doesn't affect our control systems on an assembly line. It doesn't affect the robotic machines running Linux, right? It doesn't affect all the other things. Well, but yes, it does. And most importantly, understandably, how does ransomware get into there? Now, Deloitte put out a thing a bunch of years ago that said 91% of all cybersecurity attacks actually first originated with email phishing. Now, phishing itself comes in many different forms. You can have a text messaging come to you saying, hey, you just won $50, click here. You can have a voicemail message, or you can have somebody sending a spam message that comes from a source that you're not sure who it is. But the fact that you just won $1 million, except you have to move to Nigeria to get it, that phishing, even today, still exists, even though with smart filtering. What came from that is this concept now, what is called business email compromise, which is when you look at the message and it says it's from Microsoft support.com. Well, it must be Microsoft, so I can click on it. So hackers have now used the ability to embed using impersonation attacks and domain lookalike attacks, have embedded within that malicious download payloads, which then result in having ransomware attacks. Now, the most important thing to understand about this, if those of you have ever been through a ransomware attack, is you always wonder, well, when did we get infected? Who was the person that actually clicked on the link? Was it the CEO? Well, yes, unless you're up for a raise and you say no. But if you're not for a raise, chances are it's probably some C-level person that clicked on something they weren't supposed to click on. And that started off the triggering process of ransomware. Now, did the files become immediately encrypted? Or did it sort of sit dormant for a period of time? A lot of times malware gets into an endpoint, it sits dormant for a while. Sometimes it can be there for a day. Sometimes it's still communicating with the command and control server to ask for instructions. Sometimes it can sit there dormant for over a year, right? But ultimately, when it does kick in and it does do its thing, it's encrypting the data, it's moving horizontally through the network where the least amount of security is in the internal part of the network. And then suddenly now you realize that now you don't have access to your data anymore, right? And this is what triggers downtime. This is what triggers the loss of business, loss of economics, right? This is where backups came to the rescue, right? Veeam and others that came out, everyone came out with their sort of strategy to say, we can restore your data prior to the time of the attack, right? Which fabulous, right? So this way you avoided, all the ransom thing like that. Yes, it did work. However, as everything happens in hackingism, things change, right? So let's talk about case study number one for a moment. Texas Digestive Specialist, right? Late 2025, right? Ransomware group interlock access 263 gigabits of patient data right there. It's a PII violation for HIPAA. Right off the bat. The fact that the hackers got in, leveraged ransomware, and now access a ton of patient data information and encrypted the systems, which means if you want your data, you're going to pay us Bitcoin. So immediately, this is obviously a very, very challenging thing because this is, again, is a medical, and a lot of medical firms have been hit like this, not to pick on them, but this shows you now 41,000 patient records exposed, clinic for credit monitoring, Fed agents, and the FBI got involved, right? Case study number two, Transport Knights in the UK. Why this is significant? Small to medium business. Been around 158 years. They were hit in July 2025. Hacker group, Kirek, I think it's out of Russia, guessed a single weak password, encrypted servers and backups, and demanded 5 million pounds in ransom. The company was unable to recover, and it collapsed, and 700 employees lost their jobs. The company's been around 158 years. So when people are talking about, how do you prepare for that? How do you recover from that? It starts with what is your expectation of recovery, right? Let's dive into some compelling facts real quick. Number one, only 7% of the organizations can recover from ransomware within one day. Only 7%. So the other 93% are still dealing with cleanup way after that attack has actually occurred. Downtime for malls at small to medium businesses range from 1,000 to 25,000 per hour, which means you're not doing your job. People can't access their data. You can't bring on new customers. You can't service your customers. You can't handle financials. You can't receive payments. You can't deposit to banks. All the things that go into running your business suddenly become a screeching halt, and now it's costing you money, right? Interesting. Between 8,000 to 200,000 per day in downtime costs if you take it over a 24-hour period of time, right? Even worse. 34% of the companies needed more than 30 days to recover ransomware. So what happens in the 29 days that you're trying to recover? Are you trying to still function as a business? Are you operating at 100%? Or are you operating at 5% or 10% or 11% or 3%, right? The point is that you're not operating. And when you're a small to medium business that relies on your systems, your applications, especially using SaaS applications, right? And not until it's no longer working, you now have to take a deep breath and say, oh, okay, we're just not operating. So think about that 150-year company that got hit in July and said, we have to close our doors. We're not going to recover from this. We've lost everything, right? So 94% of ransomware attacks attempt to encrypt backups, which is basically the strategy of ransomware. They go in and try to encrypt your data and keep the key and wave it in front of you, say, hey, bitcoin.com, throw it to me. I'll give you the key, right? But ultimately what that means is that you're still thinking, well, maybe backup is a way to sort of, recover from this, right? 57% of the backup compromises attempted were successful. It means that the hackers attack your backup infrastructure first before they attack you. If they take out backup out of the equation, this happened to Veeam a couple of years ago. If they attack the backup infrastructure and they're successful, 57% successful, that means right after that, they're going to go after your stuff, right? 60% of the backup recoveries fail businesses when they did it the most, which means people went out and did buy backup recovery platforms. They did buy some form of BCDR functionality, and 60% of them failed when they really needed it the most, which means when they really did get hit. Now, mind you, let's be fair. Okay, I've been around long enough to remember when we had to swap hard drives and servers, right? And if you didn't do it right, and you didn't get the RAID 5 working right, you didn't get the mirroring working properly, the whole thing was screwed, right? And you had to turn around and restore. And you pray that you put in the cassette, you just got back from Iron Mountain in the red case, it dropped off at the front desk, you plug it in, and it did not restore properly. Why? Because we didn't test it enough. We didn't validate it enough, right? So if you're going to make the investment, which obviously you need to make the investment to back up recover data, and you don't have the skills, talent, or resources, this is where providers like us come in. This is where managed services steps in and says, let us augment so you can be able to improve upon your ability to recover. Only 50% of the companies actually test their DR annually, which means when you're applying for cyber insurance and you check the box, which we'll cover in a moment, and say, yeah, we got it, we're cool, but you never bother testing it, then you're falling back into that 60 percentile where you actually need it the most. It wasn't there for you, right? Only 54% of the companies actually have a DR plan, which means if you get hit, what are you going to do? Scramble? You have to go out and hire consultants. You have to bring people in and say, okay, you figure out this mess. Well, it takes time. That's why having a plan is real important, real strategic. But yet, SMBs, only 70% have a BCDR plan. 17% of SMBs have that. Okay, here's a harsh reality. 94% of organizations that face data loss, 43% never reopen again. 51% close within 2 years. University of Texas came out with a study. That's amazing to think about that. But 94% of people that suffer data loss, ransomware, or whatever, 43%, they were done. We can't, let's think about the employees. And these are, again, could be small businesses, medium businesses, school districts, it could be whatever. But it really shows you that the harsh reality is that ransomware continues to grow, continues to be the attack vector of choice by hackers through email phishing or other means because it works, because they can hold people hostage for their data and they get paid, right? So let's talk about why backup is related to BCDR now, and what backup is vital to BCDR, enabling immediate data access and control during network outages, meaning the ability that there is a problem and you have a very good solid backup actively working, you can start restoring. You can minimize the window of time it takes for you to recover. Without a reliable backup and reliable and secure backup, there is no restoration. There's nothing coming back. What are you going to do? You're going to go in and try to wipe out the ransomware. Well, guess what? If you get hit once on Tuesday and the hacker takes Wednesday off to go to happy hour, what do you think he's doing on Thursday? He's going to rehack you again and again and again until he gets stopped. Why? Because it's all automated. Most ransomwares, especially ransomware as a service, is all AI generated attacks now. It's not some guy sitting in Florida or Texas or anywhere. Okay, Argentina, and they do their thing. It's all automated, right? So talking about backup and saying, okay, well, what do I need to do? Is it a cloud? Is it on-prem? Is it a hybrid? We'll touch that. We'll hit there. What's the first step? First step is develop a comprehensive business continuity disaster recovery plan. How are you going to recover from this when this happens? Implementing backup restore capability to support your BCDR strategy. Test, validate, adjust, and repeat. If you're going to spend the time and effort and energy into this, make it work, right? Prove it works. When you do, hire third parties to come in and do pen testing and say, okay, now restore. Did it work? Yes, it did. Thumbs up. Fantastic. Great investment. If it didn't work, fix it, right? Should your organization back up everything in cloud or on premises? Great question, right? There are some small to medium businesses here in our market. We do support the Southwest, which New Mexico, Arizona, California, and Nevada. And we have some small businesses that have 70 employees, and they are in the defense contract space. Some build body armor, some deal armament, and so on. And they ask the question, hey, we're a small business, we're just going to use the cloud. Well, what if you're FedRAMP? What if you have to be FedRAMP compliant and you decide to use a cloud provider that doesn't have FedRAMP? For those of you who don't know what FedRAMP is the federal regulations and how cloud is used. So you have to back up on-prem, right? Well, that's fine. But can you replicate it potentially to a cloud, which is the hybrid solution? Absolutely, you can, right? So understanding where your data needs to be backed up, understand how you can get to that backup quickly to restore yourself as fast as possible while maintaining the data still very much stays secure. We'll touch on that as well. Everyone asks this question. Is there a regulatory mandate that I have to require to have secure backup and do that? Oh, absolutely there is. CMMC, HIPAA, NIST, PCI, ITAR, Section 5 FTC if you're an automotive dealership, GDPR, you name it, name the acronym, believe me, within the acronym there is a backup requirement and a disaster recovery requirement, right? Organizations that are required. Now, I want to touch on something very important here that my boss brought up yesterday in our meeting. He says, it's about also maintaining data integrity. And what that means very simply is that when you've gone through a breach like ransomware, or somebody has gone in and tampered with your data, and you now have restored, you have to ensure that what you're restoring brings the data back to its highest level of integrity prior to the event. And if you cannot ensure data integrity, means are you just restoring garbage from garbage, right? That's why it's so important. And not only are you looking at the data availability, but you're also more importantly looking at making sure that you have data integrity. that you have a strategy to make sure and you validate. You just brought back, half a petabyte of data. What if a third of it was manipulated already because of where you stored the data and backup? You didn't secure your backups enough that allowed someone to get in and manipulate the data, right? Very important. So as you're kind of think about this strategy, think about the idea of going, well, ultimately we're going to restore, right? But what are we restoring? Junk? Or are we restoring actual real integrated data that we rely on as well, right? Now, here's a term you definitely got to know if you don't know it: immutable and air-gapped. Very simply, air-gapped backup locations mean that your data is in one location, your location applications are in one location, and your secure backup is in another. It's air-gapped away. So if ransomware attacks your source data, the chance of it moving laterally across the environment to get to your backup environment is blocked through an air-gapped type of network design. Vice versa. Hackers go after your backup environment and they try to compromise it while it's in an air gap environment. The chance of it moving laterally to the source data at your data center also becomes very mute as well. Extremely, very important to understand air gap architectures. Again, this is where we can come in and really provide some great guidance as well. Immutable is very important. Now, for those of you that have never gone through e-discovery, never gone through a lawsuit in your life, you're probably living somewhere that, you're probably on an island in the middle of the Pacific. When you go through e-discovery or go through a law, and the judge or the court system says, we want to see every email going back the last 5 years, and it has to be in its original untampered form, which meant that when you backed up your data and backed up those emails and backed up those documents, that in no way possible did anybody get in and manipulate that data. So the ability that when you're talking about building a very secure backup strategy, you have two business points to do here: blocking it from ransomware by air gapping the environment, and number two, making sure what you're backing up ensures that the data, even at time of restoration, that chain of custody is not broken. That if someone says, okay, where did you restore this from? We restored it from our backup environment. And how do we know this data was not tampered with? Here's a validation point of doing that. So these are things that, again, comes back into, if you're not familiar with this is where you work with people like us that can help provide that strategy to make that happen. Favorite question: doesn't my SaaS provider already back up everything in the cloud? No. Okay, truth be told, no. They back up their data. They back up. Now, the question is, how long are they backing up your data for? Is it 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 3 hours, 2 weeks, whatever? The point is that SaaS providers are going to back up the data that you have subscribed to, meaning it could be based on your contract. Some only offer 3 days, some offer 1 day. So this really falls back in the day when everyone moved to the cloud in 2004, there was this whole thing about shared responsibility model, meaning, okay, if my data is in the cloud, it's not my problem anymore, right? Wrong. Still your problem. It's your data, right? The shared responsibility model, there's things that SaaS providers do to help protect the infrastructure in which your data resides, meaning the application, the SaaS app. But the idea of understanding shared responsibility means that, well, you also are responsible for your data. And ultimately, people don't see that in their contracts with AWS or Azure or Google or else doing. You are ultimately responsible for your data. Now, Microsoft availability and backup options is something very important. Everyone talks about, I'm on Office 365, I'm okay. No, you're not. All Microsoft does is guarantee availability, which means when you have an email that's stored in a server in California or stored in an instance in the East Coast, if the West Coast system becomes unavailable, they flip you over to the East Coast, you have availability to your email. Okay. However, that does not mean necessarily it's being backed up. So if you came back to Microsoft and says, hey, I lost the email 3 days ago, can you throw me a bone here and push the email forward? No, that's not part of availability. Microsoft does open an optional backup solution. However, a lot of limitations can provide. Number one, accidental deletions. CEO's on vacation, he suddenly deleted the wrong PowerPoint or he deleted his presentation to the board. He calls IT and says, hey, bring it back. I just deleted one file. Well, unless you have a strategy and a capability to do that, Microsoft's not going to do that for you. Ransomware attacks, they got nothing for you. Back to you. If you've got to restore your environment back to 3 days ago before the ransomware attack hit, it is on you. Organizations must implement their own backup strategies to meet regulatory compliance and recovery requirements, despite even Microsoft native offerings. And Salesforce and Cisco and all the other companies that have cloud applications, ultimately it comes down to you having a backup strategy to cover your data, right? So ultimately the key benefits of understanding a business continuity disaster recovery: number one, minimize downtime, right? It's your downtime. Every time you're down, it's dollars out of your pocket. Enhanced data protection, right? Support compliance, your compliance. Just because you shove in a cloud and say, oh, they're a cloud provider and they're SaaS too, or they're using ISO, I'm cool. No, it's your compliance. You're required. Reduce financial risk. Boost operational readiness, meaning that when you're needing to maintain 24/7 operations and your systems rely on your applications and your data to work at optimal performance, and ransomware just throws a wrench in all that, the ability to, again, is to recover quickly from that. It's cost savings. Think about not having a downtime for 6 months. What did that do for your productivity, right? It kept your costs in line with your expectations of your growth and your revenue. Having one outage that lasts 3 hours could be $3,000 or it could be $300,000, right? But most important of all, why BCDR is important is understanding peace of mind, right? The organization knows that you're doing everything humanly possible to recover from things. Now, let's talk a little bit about where Kaseya Datto comes in this. Again, they're one of our most strategic partners, and they do deliver a tremendous amount of great solutions as well. Let's go back to the question of backing up everything. Data now lives everywhere and everywhere. However, we, again, as a consulting advisor, we understand that budgets are very tight, right? But yet, it still comes down to two main factors, right? In understanding business continuity and disaster recovery. RPO and RTO. RPO is very simple, right? How far back do you want to go to restore? 1 day, 2 day, 3 days? Okay. If some people come back and say, I want the last 10 days to be restored, right on. Okay. Does it come free? No. You need storage, you need applications, you need systems, capabilities, functionality, you need talent, right? So what is your tolerance as an organization saying, if we had to restore back from ransomware, do we have the backup recovery BCDR capabilities to bring back 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 3 hours? You have to decide that. You got to figure that out. You got to figure that number out. Number two is, what is your RTO? I mean, recovery from downtime. I mean, how long do you expect to be down? Mind you, you may have said to the board, or you may have said to your business partners, or you may have SLAs in place to say we will be operational within 30 minutes. Okay, that requires infrastructure, that requires talent, that requires capabilities. But these two factors ultimately become the genesis of what you build your DCBR, right? Now, let's get into this piece real quick, which is very important. People that apply for cyber liability insurance on your application, what does it say? Backup place, how long before the system is operational, which is your RTO. Now, notice in the same little checkboxes, do you have business continuity plan? Do you have a disaster recovery plan? Remember I mentioned that, less than 17% of small businesses actually have a DR plan and a BC plan? Well, if they're going to apply for cyber insurance and they click that box, they're going to have to prove that they actually have that. In this particular case, this organization is clicking, they're going to say, we're going to be back in 1 hour. Okay, right on. However, are all cybersecurity claims paid out? No. In 2024, over 40% of cybersecurity claims were denied. Why? Because they said on their application they could do X, Y, and Z. And when they actually had to be able to do, P, Q, and R, didn't happen. In 2025, 27% of data breaches claimed at the conclusion that resulted in non-payment. It means the insurance carriers went, no, you didn't actually have what you said you had. You never proved that when you deployed that device a year ago, you never followed up with it. You never made sure that it worked. Multiple studies indicate that insurers are becoming stricter. Why? Because the policy costs are going up. When they have a ransomware claim as an example, and you come back 6 months later and say, oh, by the way, we had another attack, can you kind of cover our little Katyushas here? No. They'll look and say, did you make the repairs? Did you make the remediations that we recommended? We didn't have time. Well, guess what? They don't have time to pay your claim, right? Very important to understand that. Now, let's talk about where and when, Kaseya Datto's and Coeus Consulting work together. Where do we come together with our customers? We first look at, more importantly, what do you want backed up? Files, endpoints, SaaS applications, cloud databases, all the things. This is part of what we do when we work with our Kaseya team and our Datto team, is to sit with our customers and say, okay, what really is the goal here, right? And it comes back to that cost, right? You come back to saying, well, I can't afford to do everything, but I do have stuff in Azure. I do have stuff at the endpoint. I do have stuff in the SaaS applications, and I've got a file server running NetApp or something that I want to be able to protect as well, right? So pro tip number one, first of all, calculate downtime costs, right? This is something we work with our clients on a lot, right? We get into that RTO and the RPO thing and say, okay, how long do you want to be down for? And the great thing is the conversations always start out with the same answer, 30 minutes, 10 at the most. Our CEO will have a meltdown if we're not up and running in an hour. That takes Y to make that happen. How about 3 hours? That takes, X, right? 3 days, well, that takes B, right? So the point is that figuring out the downtime costs radiates how much potentially you have to spend in order to recover. Number two, ransomware hardening. What are you doing to harden ransomware? Again, it comes back to immutability of data, air gapping your backup infrastructures, obviously patching and remediation your systems. This is where managed services comes in, and the ability to also ensure that you have a plan to say, when we have a ransomware attack, here's how we're going to respond. Many times it's shutting down VLANs. It's not just simply an endpoint thing. It's not a server thing so much. And sometimes it gets down to simply just turning off the network or shutting down certain segments within the network so the ransomware doesn't propagate. That could be part of the strategy as well, right? Ensuring recoverability. When you guys have pen testing or have third parties come in and do their validation, what's the first thing they look for? Well, the first most important thing to do is, you guys managed to bring back that data. You maybe use the on-prem to bring back laptops, or you may have used the cloud version to bring back the cloud instances, but you did successfully bring back and recover, which is fabulous, right? Right. Number, complete a quarterly DR test. This goes back to hiring potentially third parties. Attack local virtualization hosts, go after cloud, try to do a bare metal restore. All these things are important to say, if in fact this ever happened. This is important, especially for cybersecurity insurance. They may come back and say, well, guess what? You actually did prove it. So we'll give you a policy. Maybe we'll even lower your premiums, right? Type of thing as well, right? And of course, tip number 5, you've got to create a plan. This is where we help with our customers, right? How are you going to recover? Where are you going to recover? What's your expectations? How are you going to fail over? This is kind of where we kind of come into our play. So ultimately, when we talk about our offerings, number one, we're really about building resilience within your business, right? Whether it's devising an air gap backup solution with a DR, BCP undertone. Part of it is our expertise. We work a lot with our clients and we use a lot of the Datto capabilities to come in and say, here's the best way that we can get you to where your ITO and RPO is. So when you're setting the expectation with your leadership team and your SLAs, how are you able to do that, right? Of course, this is about data protection, right? It goes back to the data integrity comment I made that my boss wanted me to stress, right? How to ensure that you're restoring data back to its original integrity form, right? We're not here, Kaseya is not here, and Datto's not here, and Coeus Consulting is not here to sell a product. This is not a product answer. That never will be a product answer. Now, there may be people out there that say, oh, I have an appliance. Great. That's only like 10% of the puzzle. It's about a partnership of understanding how we look at the process, the people, the talent, and the capabilities to ensure that we can restore back when you need to be restored as well. Cloud on-prem depends on what we want to do, how we want to do it, how we want to do it, and what costs are involved. Here's the most important thing I hope you pick up from this, right? Every time you're up and running, it gives you a competitive advantage. Every time a competitor gets hit with ransomware and they're down for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, that's an opportunity for you to go after more market share. So when businesses economics are looking at the cost of why you do BCDR and backups, it's like, well, that's a cost. However, if it does improve your uptime from where you were down to 10 hours every month, and that suddenly went to 10 minutes, that means that you now are not only continuously functioning as a business competitively, but when competitors or other people that suddenly are dropping off flies because they didn't do the same thing you did, you just gave yourself one hell of a competitive advantage as well, right? So first step, what we do, first thing we do in a BCDR engagement is we do a readiness assessment. That's the first thing we look at. What do you have? Where's your data? Right? What's your strategy? What's your expectation of recovery? What's your expectations of restoration? Right? And then how do we get there? How do we make sure that the data protection, data integrity maintains at the highest level? How do we make sure that you're resilient? And most important of all, how do we make this cost effective? We focus a lot on small and medium businesses. We really serve that market extremely well in the Southwest. That's our gravy, because small and businesses today have to do more with less, right? So using our managed services and using some of our capabilities and partnerships with Datto, we put together some really good solution functionalities without coming and saying, you're going to need to spend $5 billion. No, the salespeople say, no, go ahead and spend $5 billion. But reality is no. It comes in like, let's go back to what your RTO and RPO is. Right. And then we build back from there as well. So Anyway, that's pretty much all I had today from a presentation today. I want to thank you very much for making time today for the event. If you have a moment, please, I do ask if you can fill out the questionnaire or survey that will be coming as well. If anybody has any questions, please go into the QA screen and type in any questions. I'll give it just a few moments as that's happening. But I do want to thank every one of you today for making the time for being on. I appreciate you being on, and obviously over here at Coeus Consulting and also our friends over at Kaseya Datto, we thank them very much as well for their sponsorship and support and their partnership as well. At the end of the presentation today, we'll be receiving a survey, as I mentioned. Please do take time to fill it out. Let me check any questions, anything there? No open questions. Excellent. Well, thank you all very much for making time today. Again, my name is John Gromley. I'm the events coordinator here at Coeus Consulting. Thank you very much for making time to being on the event, and look forward to future events as well. So have a very good day and a wonderful weekend as well. Take care.